We are having a massive heat wave over here in England and Wales, so I've lost track of what take I'm on. I'm making a lot of mistakes. I'm losing the plot, but let's just get into it, hey? My name is Victoria, or Vicky, or Vic if you're my sister. I'm a historian and fibre artist, and I am the human being behind Fibre Haptic. Check out the links for more of my stuff. In my first video, I mentioned that you can make a junk journal out of something as simple as just some folded over notepaper stapled into a rudimentary book. That is more or less what I am going to show you today. In this case, I'm using a greetings card as the cover, along with a whole bunch of papers that I've painted on, some which I printed on in the previous video, bits of old envelopes, and some of the notebook paper from two different old notebooks, which I don't really use anymore because I don't much like the format of them. The note card I'm using actually came from a set of Turner paintings, and this one somehow has got a corner missing. I don't know if one of the cats maybe got to it or it got damaged in a move, but in any case, it's not something I would want to send to somebody, but I don't particularly want to throw it away either. And this little project is great if you have a greetings card hanging around which you've received from someone which you think is a little bit too nice or a bit too sentimental to throw away, but you're not really sure what to do with it long term. I'm also using a bit of packaging, so you can see there that is a paper bag from a chemist. I've decided to just cut out the cross from the front, try and make that a decorative element, and there's also some other bits which I have drawn patterns on with acrylic markers in the past. And in addition to this, I've got my craft knife. I've got a pair of scissors with quite big openings for the hands. That sort of cuts down on sore spots and blisters. It's really definitely worth getting a metal ruler with a sort of non-slip backing on it. That's one of the best purchases I've ever made for this kind of thing. I've also got glue stick, double-sided sticky tape for things that a glue stick is not quite going to be strong enough for, and I've got my stapler. Now, I want my junk journal to have a few pockets for extra tags, bits of paper, things I might find along the way. So to create my initial two pockets, I've folded the envelope that came with the card in half, and you'll be able to see when I put everything together that that gives me two pockets at different points of the notebook. And all that you can see me doing here is essentially auditioning my different pieces of paper, measuring them up against the cover there and trimming off any excess. And you'll be able to see that not all of these, far from it, are the same size as each other. What I love to do, and what I think is a major benefit of making your own junk journal over just buying a notebook, is that you can play around with the sizes of paper. You can have smaller ones flipping out in front of larger ones. You can layer up different colours and things, and that can give some really interesting effects. The offcuts, as you've just seen, tend to go into a little jar that I keep for the purpose, and all of these little tiny scraps get put together into snippet rolls, and you can see a bit of a roll that I've made in the past there. I will definitely be revisiting snippet rolls in another video. Now, it doesn't bother me at all if lines go vertically rather than horizontally. I don't mind which way round I write things in a journal, and also having some vertical lines can help with a lot of sketches and little bits of artwork. It can be a lot less intimidating than having a blank page there. Now, of course, I have the advantage that I've been doing this for quite a while now, so I do have quite a variety of paper in my stash just hanging around. But it is really amazing how much you can gather just in a month or two of collecting bits of recycling. So I use a lot of brown paper packaging in my junk journal. Sorry, I nearly broke out into a bit of the Sound of Music there. But I use a lot of brown paper in my junk journals. There's some basic copier paper in there as well. Things from previous projects, again, like university notes that I've then gone and painted over. You really can gather quite a lot. If you think you're going to struggle with that, or you're not quite sure how to get started, really the best thing to do is meet up with a few other people. Find a local group, start the hobby with a friend. If you can swap supplies with somebody else, so you each bring an old notebook and then you exchange bits of paper, it can help build up an interesting set of different papers really quickly. And speaking of really quickly, I've decided to double the speed of this because there's only so much interest you can get out of watching me chop up bits of paper over and over again. Now, in the case of these two, you can see what I mean about what happens when you start layering up paper. So on their own, that purple print and the bluish green print, they're not that interesting. As soon as you place one over the other, you increase the possibilities, the inspiration you can get from that paper. And yeah, my ring light that I was using to film decided to start flickering rather a lot during that bit of filming, so some of it has been missed out. What I'm doing here is I'm folding that piece of paper twice, sort of the beginnings of like making a fan. Essentially fold it one way once and then out again. I'm not going to use that as a page. Instead, you'll see later on, I'm going to stick it onto one of the pages as a sort of pop-up or pull-out element. And as I go through my papers, there's a few things like that where I decide not to put it in as a page, but I decide to do something with it later. That purple print there, I've decided to make the centerpiece of the book, so I'm trying to keep that on top. You can see here I'm trying to decide whether to put that decorated book page, whether to stick that onto the envelope, but I've decided to leave it out for now. You will see me dither over that particular book page quite a lot because it's very thin. It's quite a delicate page, and I decided that it wouldn't really stand up on its own. So I've got all of my pages in the right order. I folded them in half as a stack, and I'm now just clipping them together, trying to hold them together to make sure that those center seams all stay lined up when I staple it. I'm using some sewing clips. You can easily use bulldog clips, paper clips, get a friend to hold it, just anything that will keep those pages straight while you're stapling them in. And you can see, probably see, I've got a stapler that swivels round 90 degrees just to help me get towards the center there. You could just use a bigger heavy duty stapler. There's a few different options you can use, and again, handy if you club together with somebody to buy something like that, especially if you're not sure how much use you're going to get out of it. Yeah, just moving the clip out of the way. What I only thought of a little too late is that by stapling from the center page, stapling downwards onto the centre page, the staples, the pointy bit of the staples are going to stick out of the back. Now, they have ended up flat enough in my case that I'm not too worried. If you are concerned about that after you've done it, you could stick a piece of paper along the outside of that spine just to cover those up, or stick a bit of tape. And here you can see I'm just smoothing down all of the resulting pages, all sorts of interesting sizes and orientations. And I'm looking for something to cover up that writing with, not least because there is a mention of Hitler on there. That's some old history university notes of mine. In fact, I think it might be a bit of my PhD thesis. So I've decided in this case to cover it up with some of the lined paper that I didn't use before, and I'm just going to stick that in with a glue stick, and I'll be able to draw over that, write on it, whatever I want to. Those bits of text which are sticking up will just become some background elements in the end. I'm not too worried about a small amount of text running up the wrong way there. And of course, sticking extra bits of paper as well as covering things up, it can also reinforce pages if you think that the paper is a bit too thin for whatever art materials you're going to use to form a picture on top. If you're using something quite watery, like watercolour, or something that involves sort of quite a lot of friction, if you're using wax crayons, for example, you may want to just reinforce the pages by doubling up the thickness. Although you should also be aware that depending on what sort of glue you use, that might start smearing some elements. It might make the paper a little bit damp initially. You can also tear quite thin paper if you're using a glue stick on it. So these are just things to bear in mind if you're using very thin paper. And the reason I've brought that jotter back out is so that I have got a surface that I don't care about, which I can put behind the papers as I glue them. So then any excess glue that runs off the edges is going onto the front of that old notebook, and it's not going onto the journal or the cutting mat behind. That may seem like a really, really obvious point, but you would not believe how many times I just forget to do that and end up with glue smears places I don't want them. So now we've come back again to that very thin book page. You may be able to tell from my finger movements that I was thinking about that once again. What I've decided to do is to glue that to the previous page. That means that that book page is now reinforced, and it also creates quite an interesting page in itself. That expanse of blue now has something a lot more interesting happening on it. You can see my centre spread there, which I'm very happy with that being doubled up in the middle of the book. There is the other half of that very thin book page. I'm trying to decide again here whether to do the same thing again and just stick it down to that blue thing. In the end, I decide to use that piece of paper that I rolled off some excess red paint onto. It's already got a fold in it, and it is conveniently roughly the right size. Otherwise I possibly wouldn't have thought of this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to double up the thickness, but I'm also going to create a new fold out element. And in order to secure all of this, I'm going to use a combination of the glue stick and you'll see in a bit I'm also going to use some washi tape. Now, I was a bit sceptical of washi tape at first. It did seem like a slightly frivolous thing to purchase. However, it has proven extremely useful for building the journals themselves and for adding decorative elements. I am now fully a washi tape convert, and in common with a lot of other craft supplies, unfortunately I now have rather a large collection of it. Not unfortunately, but it is something that I thought I would be able to control a little better. But when it comes to cheap multi-packs of washi tape, apparently I have no self-control. So to reinforce that seam even more, I've decided to add a third piece of paper onto this side, and because it's only going to have quite a narrow strip extending beyond that fold on the side where the green circles are, instead of glue stick I'm using double-sided sticky tape for this. So I'm going to use one piece one side of where the fold is and another piece the other side. And I could have glued the rest of it down. I could have put another strip of tape on just to fully secure that down. What I've decided to do in the end is just leave it flapping slightly loose after that second bit of tape. You don't have to secure every single bit of paper down, every side of the paper down. Sometimes just having a few loose elements is actually quite nice. Yeah, I swear at some point I will get all of the action, all the relevant movements happening on camera. Again, my video skills are a work in progress. There's me failing to get the tape off of that corner, so I'm going to try a different corner. So there we go, that's now become quite an interesting page in itself. And when we fold it back over, yeah, you see a little bit of excess glue sticking to things I don't want it to there. Now we've reinforced the paper. What we haven't done is added any sort of reinforcement where that paper forms the middle of the signature. So essentially what we've done there is we've added a lot of extra weight to that thin book page without reinforcing the fold where it meets its other half in the first half of a journal. So what we need to do now to prevent that from tearing or weakening even further is to essentially make a hinge out of washi tape on each side. So you can see I've chosen quite a thick piece there. Washi tape is not in itself super sticky. It is designed to peel off quite easily. Although, of course, it really does depend. When you want it to stick, it doesn't. When you want it to come off easily, it brings the paper off. It is tricky stuff. So for something like this, for reinforcing that sort of hinge element, you really do want to use quite a thick, quite a wide strip. There we go then, that's a strip on the other side, trying not to extend it beyond the top or bottom of the page, otherwise the page won't turn when you want it to. smoothing that down. And I really like how that washi blends in with the red on the page, so that then when you open it up, you get a lot of red elements, and then you open it up to reveal all the green and those purple patterned elements as well. So that's one of the bits of the bag from the pharmacy, which I decorated just in a spare moment. I tend to keep a stack of strips of paper on hand in the living room, so if I do fancy doing something 5-minute bit of a creative exercise in front of a television, I can just pick them up and a couple of different colour marker pens and just draw various designs on them, and that gives me a nice stash of decorated strips for adding to this kind of thing. And that really is one of the great things about junk journaling, is there are lots and lots of different stages, all of which are quite simple in themselves. So you can just drop in at whatever stage you feel like. If you want to put together, if you want to bring together a set of papers which you think would make a nice signature, you can do that in 10 minutes. If you want to decorate whole book pages with watercolour, that's quite a fast exercise you can do. You can cut strips off some papers, you can cut envelopes into strips, cut down some packaging into pieces of the right size, sit there and doodle for 5 minutes onto some of those scraps, and all of it builds up. It's all part of the process. You're not doing a whole artwork at once. It's all of these little tiny steps that are very simple and satisfying to do in themselves, and it can all come together into this really quite beautiful, satisfying, unique object. And if at any point you feel like, oh, I didn't want to do that, I've messed that up, you either turn that piece of paper into something else. You could, if you really hate what you've done, you can just use it to reinforce another piece of paper, hide what you've done entirely. You can always add more things to it. You can tear it into smaller pieces, use it with other pieces. There's no sort of terminal mistakes in junk journaling. There's always something that you can use that piece of paper for, almost no matter what you've done to it. Short of, chewing it up and swallowing it, there's little you can do to a piece of paper that renders it completely useless. So what I did just there was I decided that I didn't want to use a couple of those pieces of paper just yet, but I do want to keep them with this journal because I think they will blend in quite nicely. So I'm just putting them in the pocket. That's exactly what those pockets are for. And then finally I've got my spare envelope, which I'm going to make into a sort of combination flip out page and pocket. So I'm going to glue the flap of that envelope to the very first page. So it's hanging over the edge of the first page, gluing that down. And a glue stick is completely sufficient for this process. You don't really need double-sided sticky tape at this point. So you can see when you fold that out, you've then got a sort of hidden pocket, like a full page size pocket essentially. And just to reinforce it on this side, I'm sticking a strip of a different washi tape down, just making sure I don't accidentally tape the pocket closed as I'm doing this. tape going on there. Which is already giving a sort of blue theme to this inside page. We'll be able to continue that later. And I could have stopped here, but I decided while I had the tape out and while I was starting a bit of a blue theme, I may as well carry on with a bit of a decorative element and also just make sure that flap stays stuck down in case I catch it on anything. So I'm adding a couple more strips of that checkered washi tape, which is starting to create a sort of interesting, I don't know, does that look a bit like a suitcase? Maybe like a messenger bag type effect there. So a couple of strips of that coming round to the other side. Because I know that I won't be able to get those pieces on the other side exactly the same length, I've decided to really lean into that and do them wildly different lengths. If you can't be accurate, then be inaccurate on purpose. And again, off the screen, because I'm not good at this yet. You'll see in a minute, this is another blue washi tape, but with a different design on it. Starting to bring in a bit of yellow and a bit of a floral element. And that is the first page of a journal already decorated. So, thank you for watching that. If you have enjoyed this video, please do like it. Please do subscribe. I'm a new channel and I do need all that kind of support. You can also check out things on my shop. Thanks for watching.